And we don't need that. We have a lot of amendments. The last item for consideration is H.R. 3684, the Invest in America Act. Without objection, the Subcommittee on Highways, Transit, Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, Hazardous Materials discharged from further consideration of H.R. 3684, and I call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3684, offered by Mr. DeFazio, number A and S.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for a statement. All right. So I dressed for the occasion. I wore my Route 66 socks. And Route 66, when we think back, it's nostalgia. It was a different era. And it was a time before the interstate program. And how did things work then? With the poster? Not so well. Kansas said, we're going to build a new turnpike, and Oklahoma said, we'll do the same. Well, you see this? This is the state line. This is Amos Schweitzer's farm field. And until the Eisenhower Plan, this part didn't get built until they got an 80% federal match because they couldn't afford it. But there's some who say, oh, we should just devolve the duty to the states. It didn't work in the 1950s. It's not going to work in the 21st century. So, you know, those were days, that's good, thanks. You know, when Congress and the White House, you know, together met extraordinary challenges to our nation. We didn't think small. We weren't puny. You know, we did big things. And we led the world in post-war recovery and economic wealth. That was the Eisenhower Plan that helped facilitate that. It was actually originally called the National Defense Highway Network. The original design was to be able to move military equipment around the country to repel a Soviet invasion because of the existential threat of Russia and the Cold War, or to evacuate the cities in case of nuclear attack. That was the original. But it grew to something way more than that. And it joined the country and transformed the country in ways that Dwight David Eisenhower or any of his peers at that time could never have ever anticipated. It made us wealthier, more productive, more connected, and we led the earth. We led all of the other countries on earth on infrastructure. It was the envy of the world.
Okay, he should be reading this for at least 5 minutes, so.
Hi. Okay. We led the world. Sadly now, we're dropped into much down into second-tier status in terms of our infrastructure. 47,000 bridges on the national highway system need substantial repair replacement. 40% of the national highway system needs to be rebuilt, not just paved over with another coat of asphalt. Could we be quiet, please? Not just paved over with more asphalt. And our transit systems have a $100 billion backlog, and that doesn't even begin to talk about the decrepit state of rail in the United States of America, you know, in terms of passenger rail. So, you know, we've seen that Eisenhower era and slightly post-Eisenhower era infrastructure is wearing out. It's worn out. It needs to be replaced, rebuilt, modernized. In there is an incredible opportunity for this nation with a new vision for how we do transportation and how we move people and goods in this country. That's what the INVEST Act is about. Not going to do Eisenhower 8.0. We have been doing the same thing with the same policies, the same directions to the states for 30 years. And during that time period, the costs of congestion have risen fourfold to $166 billion a year. Hours wasted, fuel wasted, deliveries delayed, business incurring extra expenses. We have to approach this differently. And again, we have to replace it. Let's rebuild it with new materials that are stronger, more resilient, less polluting in their production. In fact, they've even invented carbon negative concrete. It's not ready for big time yet, but we're headed there. Concrete right now is 7% of our carbon pollution in this country. We can move quickly to half that, and then we're going to keep making progress. They can actually sequester CO2 in concrete. And we're making strides in recycling asphalt and other areas. So we can rebuild with materials that are more climate friendly, will last longer. We can rebuild in a way that deals with resilience to severe weather events, sea level rise. In the West, we have to rebuild resilient to earthquakes and other natural threats around the country. And as we rebuild, we can also deal with what is the 21st century existential threat. When we had the National Defense Highway System, it was the Soviet Union, Cold War, nuclear war, invasion. Now it's climate change. And the single largest contributor to climate change in the United States of America is carbon dioxide emitted by the burning of fossil fuels in surface transportation, by far. So there's another opportunity. We can deal with climate change as we modernize. We can electrify the national highway network. We can also accommodate the potential future of green hydrogen and hydrogen charging, particularly for bus fleets and others. Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, not exactly a garden spot. They have put up a solar array. They're going to crack water, and they're going to produce totally green hydrogen to run their bus fleet. And initially, they're going to have a surplus, and they have a market to sell that green hydrogen. The opportunities are endless, and they can be localized, even down to relatively small communities like that. So you're dealing with climate change, you're creating jobs, and you're actually, in the end, saving money. What's wrong with that? At the same time, we can also propose to deal with some of the social equity issues that have been created by the current transportation system. Transit deserts, underserved, unserved areas, a lot of minority communities, a lot of rural areas all around the nation, small cities. So we have components in this bill to deal with that, all those issues. We have here before us a tremendous opportunity also in terms of bringing back manufacturing to the United States of America. We're going to close the last loopholes. Transportation already had the strongest Buy America requirements of any part of the federal government. The Pentagon and some other places should wake up. But we're going to close those last remaining loopholes. And we're going to make the vehicles, the materials here. We're going to have the jobs here. They can't be exported. We're going to have worker retraining programs to bring people along who've been left behind. People in my rural areas are struggling to find decent jobs. People in inner cities who can't find decent jobs. We can do all this while building out a visionary 21st century transportation plan. Now, I know a number of the states are saying, no, we like the status quo. You've been doing the status quo for decades, and it's just getting worse. And I'll just mention one project, which I think is very inspiring, is the project from Richmond to DC. They said, oh, big problems, 95, horrible congestion. We could build one more lane each way for $10 to $12 billion. Oh, and in 10 years, with induced demand, people will be parked again. They said, well, is there a different way to do it? Could we get to DC with rail? Well, no, the rail's at capacity. There's only one bridge over the Potomac, 98% capacity. So the state of Virginia sat down with CSX, and they worked out a mutually beneficial agreement, an agreement that will both enhance the movement of freight and dramatically enhance the movement of high-speed or higher-speed commuter rail. They have to build a new bridge over the Potomac River. They're going to have to build some track. It's very expensive. It'll cost $5 billion. Oh, wait a minute. Adding the lanes was going to cost $10 billion. Create pollution and create congestion. So this bill is going to require that states, before they go out and do the same old thing they have been doing for decades, which isn't working, they have to look at viable alternatives and evaluate the alternatives and find the least cost, best alternative, least polluting alternative that will better move people and goods. That's what this bill is about. It's transformative. People are afraid of change. I get that. But it's time. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.